Merci, madame. You know, there's nothing better than a Belgian chocolate. And as the saying goes, good things come in small packages. And that sort of describes Belgium, a small country filled with great things.
We're starting in Europe's symbolic capital, Brussels. Then we'll head across the Belgian countryside to Bruges, a medieval city suspended in time. There's something special about Belgium. Just about the size of the state of Maryland, it's a diverse tapestry of culture, history, and language. Belgium is divided into two ethnic areas: Dutch-speaking Flanders in the north and French-speaking Wallonia in the south. And for nearly 2 centuries, these groups have balanced their patriotic spirit with their historic differences. This is a country of connoisseurs. Belgians love the arts. They celebrate great beer, and they savor superb chocolate. Belgians appreciate the good things in life, and they're willing to work hard to get them.
As a travel writer, I come to Belgium to reward myself, to expand my horizons and try out new things. In this series, I hope to share with you what I think are some of the very best values and most interesting sights, so you can create your own dream vacation.
Brussels is Europe's unofficial capital. It's home of the European Union and headquarters of NATO. There are more ambassadors in this town than any other in the world. I guarantee you this city has plenty to satisfy these discriminating world travelers. Belgians are proud of their capital, especially the generous green spaces and inventive architecture. This is a city that's willing to adapt to new ideas, but fiercely loyal to its elegant old world heritage. Brussels' splendid central square, called the Grand Place, has always been the heart of the city. 17th century guild houses rim the plaza, survivors of an age when merchant guilds dominated the economic life of cities. These medieval trade associations strictly controlled their own corner of the market and showed off their considerable wealth with their fancy headquarters or guild houses. The town hall dates all the way back to the early 1400s, when Brussels was booming thanks to the cloth trade. Today it houses Brussels' excellent tourist office. There are so many things to see and do in Brussels, it's hard to know where to begin. But armed with maps and information, we're ready to jump right in. Tucked between northern and southern Europe, Belgium was an attractive pawn for its more powerful neighbors. The bigwigs of Europe passed this small country back and forth for nearly 1,000 years. For a time, the Dukes of Burgundy claimed it. Then it was the Habsburgs. When the French handed Belgium to the Dutch about 200 years ago, the people here decided they'd had enough and rebelled against the outsiders.
After the Belgian Revolution in the 19th century, Belgians jealously guarded their personal liberties, such as freedom of speech and freedom of the press. As a result, this city became a refuge for writers and intellectuals throughout Europe.
Victor Hugo lived in this house after fleeing Paris to escape Napoleon III's coup d'etat. And over here, Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto. At first glance, the people here seem to have a dignified reserve. But that apparent formality quickly gives way to a passion for the arts and a particular love of whimsy. How else can you explain the impish mannequin piss? The locals regard the cheeky lad as a symbol of their own delightfully irreverent spirit. There are many legends as to how the little boy became immortalized. The most famous claims he put out the burning fuse of a bomb that threatened the Grand Place by using the most natural of extinguishing methods. Mannequin Piss has fans from around the world who have shown their admiration by sending costumes to add to his wardrobe. They've donated more than 250 outfits to clothe Brussels' most famous icon. City officials regularly dress him in different selections from his novel walk-in closet. Leaving the little imp, our next stop kind of makes you wonder, does this country have a special fondness for all things small? In the last century, there were hundreds of puppet theaters scattered throughout Belgium. This is Theater Toon, run by the 7th generation of a puppeteering dynasty.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm Walter, the street kid from Brussels. But here in the Three Musketeers, I have not the main part because the star is a certain D'Artagnan.
In past times, puppet shows hooked audiences much the way TV miniseries do today.
Oh, my nose tempt.
In the 19th century, they were performed in episodes. For instance, the Three Musketeers were performed in 3 weeks, the Hunchback in 2 weeks, and the longest was Les Pardaillons from Zevaco, and it was performed in 72 evenings.
Today I received my new Musketeer's cap. Well, look, it's beautiful, no? Well, of course, it makes many jealous blokes, and I have an appointment here with a certain Bernajou. He wants to give me a fencing lesson, it appears. I'm very curious about that.
Many of the puppet theaters were bombed out during World War II, but they've started to make a comeback.
Hello, my little D'Artagnan. Hello, Master Bernajou.
With more than 1,000 puppets in its collection, Theater Toon always takes an entertaining stab at the old classics.
Ow! Oh, I die with jerks and jolts.
Belgians are passionate about many things, but food may top the list. In fact, Brussels has more gourmet restaurants per capita than Paris. And Belgian cuisine has a reputation for combining French refinement with German portions.
Le Falstaff restaurant is a great place to sample Belgian specialties. Inside, huge stained glass windows narrate Shakespeare's jovial Falstaff legend. The national obsession is mussels and fries, and Belgians have elevated this basic fare to an art form. The best mussels are cultivated in the Netherlands and expertly cooked in white wine sauce. To go local, you must top off a traditional Belgian meal with beer. Belgian brewmasters are worthy successors of the alchemists of old. More than 300 different beers are brewed here. The backbone of Belgium is a staunch, unapologetic middle class. Nobles may have built the castles, but it was the middle-class merchants who forged the cities and commissioned the works of art. There are more than 70 museums in Brussels. Belgians adore artwork in general, and their own paintings in particular. At the Royal Museum of Fine Arts, you'll marvel at the originals of masters that you may have only seen in books. You can feast your eyes on the likes of Peter Paul Rubens and Salvador Dali. Especially moving is the collection of works by Peter Bruegel the Elder, who was a genius at combining biblical and moral allusions with scenes from everyday peasant life. Many consider him the greatest genre painter of the 16th century. In The Fall of Icarus, the mythological hero disappears into the sea while the village people continue about their daily business. Jacques-Louis David, who took an active part in the French Revolution, spent years of exile in Belgium after Napoleon's empire collapsed. In his famous work, Death of Marat, he depicts the revolutionary leader after he's been murdered in his bathtub. David's neoclassic style and his deep feelings for the issues of the day allowed him to create this astonishingly stark and moving portrait. Belgium's reputation as a refuge from repressive regimes fostered a thriving art scene well into the 19th and 20th centuries.
The Belgian love for beautiful things isn't confined to painting. Brussels owes much of its architectural splendor to the late 19th century Art Nouveau movement.
And one of the city's famous Art Nouveau-style buildings now houses the superb Musical Instruments Museum. In extraordinarily well-designed displays, the collection embraces instruments through the ages and from around the world. The museum's planners believe that musical instruments should be seen and heard. So, using headphones and infrared technology, visitors can listen to about 200 musical extracts. There's a special emphasis on Belgian musical traditions, such as the dulcimer, that originated in the Middle East and was carried here by the religious crusaders of the 12th century. It became especially fashionable with women and girls. Drums, which have been the heartbeat of Belgian processions for centuries, were popular with the military and the Archers Guild, among others. The bagpipe was the instrument of shepherds and dancers. Shepherds often acted as guardians of musical traditions for the community. They relied on music to keep their animals calm and prevent them from straying. Brussels' magnificent cathedral was begun in 1226 and took some 300 years to build. The stained glass windows were bestowed by Habsburg Emperor Charles V and the 16th century governors, who seemed to have a special fondness for this Gothic masterpiece. Protestant reformers furiously ransacked the church's early artwork, but over the centuries, much of the decoration has been restored. Check out the wooden pulpit carved by an Antwerp sculptor at the turn of the 18th century. Angels are driving Adam and Eve from paradise toward the scary skeletons of death. Not all of Brussels' sites are from centuries past. Perhaps the town's most original monument is the Atomium. This cluster of giant spheres represents the atomic structure of an iron molecule enlarged 165 billion times. Take an elevator to the top for spectacular views of the city. The Atomium is a celebration of the spirit of science and was built for the 1958 World's Fair.
Leave it to the Belgians to create an entire museum dedicated to the art of the comic strip. In this country, comic strips have been taken seriously for years.
In another Art Nouveau building, exhibits trace comic strips from their earliest forms to current favorites. If you're a kid at heart like I am, you can't imagine the Sunday paper without the comic pages. It's a kick to see how a completely different culture gets its laughs. I've decided humor may be the universal language. First appearing in the 1920s, Belgium's most beloved character, Tintin, has become popular throughout the world. The adventures of the young reporter and his smart-aleck dog have been featured in more than 200 million books. Always on the side of good, globe-trotting Tintin and four-legged Snowy get themselves in the most amazing predicaments. Just off the Grand Place, Brussels' lower town is a patchwork of quirky streets and squares. Here, musicians play, street vendors hawk their wares, and artists for hire ply their trade. I've decided to investigate that famous Belgian artistic sensibility firsthand. You think my portrait will be more suitable for the Museum of Fine Arts or the Comic Strip Museum?
I think this is a face only my mother could love.
Brussels' elegant upper town is where stylish locals come to escape the city hubbub and make the scene. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the city's political center had shifted to the upper town. The newly formed country quickly modernized, spurred by the ambitions of its early kings. Belgium delved into colonialism, mainly through the callous aspirations of King Leopold II. Located just outside the city, the Royal Museum of Central Africa was originally founded to celebrate Belgium's colonial empire in the Belgian Congo, now called the Democratic Republic of Congo. After ascending to the throne in 1865, Leopold II wanted to expand his empire. Aided by explorer Henry Stanley of Dr. Livingstone, I presume, fame, Leopold grabbed control of a huge portion of Central Africa, all for himself, with no parliament to curb his power. Over the next several decades, he became enormously wealthy through slavery and by exploiting African people in the land. An international outcry against atrocities committed under Leopold's rule forced the Belgian parliament to strip him of his fiefdom and annex the colony to the nation. Though the museum was once considered an imperialist showpiece, it's now been updated to focus on African tribal culture and wildlife. After trekking through half a dozen of the city's best museums, I'm dying to put my feet up. The Hotel Amigo, just a block off the Grand Place, may have the most convenient location in town. In old Belgian slang, Amigo meant prison, and in fact, there once was a prison on this site. Today, this plush hotel is about as far from a prison as you can get. The hotel's claim to fame is its understated luxury and its location, a stone's throw from the Grand Place. We're bidding farewell to Brussels and heading to Bruges, about an hour's drive northwest. We're going from today's capital of Europe to the place many people considered the capital of Northern Europe 600 years ago. Bruges is a perfectly preserved medieval fairy town with guild houses, castles, and spires. Graceful swans glide across the canals. And the entire city is like a huge open-air museum. Until the 16th century, Bruges was one of the most successful, wealthy cities in Europe. Merchants came from all over to buy and sell here. A lucrative textile industry developed, and traders became rich dealing silk, fish, and furs. It was here that Europe's first stock exchange was born. But when the town's river silted up and competition from English weavers became fierce, Bruges fell on hard times. Much of the town's trade shifted to Antwerp.
Like a sleeping beauty, Bruges existed nearly undisturbed for 4 centuries. Not many other places on Earth preserve their early heritage so well. All around are meandering canals, cobbled streets, and quiet corners where time seems to have stood still.
I like to start my walking tour of Bruges at the Markt. The large open square pulses with pedestrians and horse-drawn carriages, and wonderful medieval buildings are all around. In the Middle Ages, merchant guilds dominated Bruges' economic life. Today, most of the guild houses lining the market have been converted to restaurants. In this one, town leaders imprisoned Archduke Maximilian of Austria for 3 weeks in the 15th century because he attempted to restrict their privileges. When he later became the Holy Roman Emperor, he repaid his former captors by helping to redirect trade to Antwerp. For more than 500 years, this former palace was home to the Belgian governors. The Groothuis Museum gives a feel for how the well-to-do lived in medieval times. The lords of Groothuis were very powerful figures in Bruges. The Lord of Groothuis was an honorary title. The lord had a monopoly on groot, a mixture of herbs and flowers used to flavor beer. Beer was the most popular drink of the day, partly because it was boiled during processing and was safer to drink than water. Because the lord of the house dominated the groot supply, he was a very rich man.
In the 14th century, hops became the preferred flavoring. But the Lord of Groothuis still made out okay. He was permitted to collect taxes on beer instead.
During the town's heyday, the people of Bruges gained a reputation as snazzy dressers. The well-to-do throughout Europe were decking themselves in lacy finery, and Bruges became lace-making central. In the Middle Ages, a thriving cottage industry produced lace for the European market. But women of all ages and every social class adopted the skill as an accepted hobby, and for centuries filled their hours winding thread into unbelievably intricate patterns. The women of Bruges still keep the art alive as a gift for future generations. Watching the painstaking work makes it obvious why handmade lace is so expensive today.
The religious crusades of the Middle Ages led to a shortage of men. Rather than live alone or rely on the charity of their families, many women chose to enter organized communities of single women.
Starting in the 13th century, homes known as beguinages began to appear. The women who joined them were not nuns, but they did take vows of chastity and led simple, modest lives. They prayed, made lace, and cared for the sick and poor. If they found a husband, they were free to leave. Joining a beguinage wasn't free. Most of the women were from middle-class families and had to pay an entry fee and maintenance. Today, Benedictine nuns, clothed in 15th century style vestments, occupy the beguinage's tranquil houses. It took 200 years to build the Cathedral of Our Lady. The tall spire towers above one of Bruges' greatest treasures. Inside is the marble sculpture Madonna and Child, an early work by Michelangelo. When the original client failed to pay for the statue, Michelangelo sold it to a merchant from Bruges. It was the only work of the great artist to leave Italy in his lifetime. Beyond the famous sculpture, the Church of Our Lady is a treasury of art and pious decoration, attesting to Bruges' glory days. Once you've seen Bruges' highlights, I recommend you ditch your guidebooks and simply stroll the back streets. Here, regular people go about their daily lives in an astonishingly beautiful town lifted straight from the pages of history. You're certain to make your own discoveries.
I've discovered another chocolate shop, and I think I need one for the road. Another Belgian work of art. Until next time, I'm Rudy Maxa.